Welcome to Best Around, the show where three friends get together and break down their picks for the greatest movies ever made. I'm Chris.
I'm Mickey.
I'm Steve.
And this week we're talking about the best 90s comedies.
Oh my God!
We decided on 90s comedies for a couple of reasons. The decade's ripe with a wide range of comedic styles. We knew we would finally be able to make these lists without stepping all over each other trying to pick the same movies, and we just thought it'd be a generally really fun thing to dive into. But before we do that, we have a new segment to debut on Best Around called The Have To.
Deal from your have to.
What?
The have to.
Are you?
It's where the fear lives.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
Could you start over again?
Oh.
Seeing as how we had a tough time narrowing our list down to just 4 movies each, and the 90s being so flooded with great comedies, we decided to throw some love to the movies that didn't make our list, but we promised to talk about later on Best Around. Steve, what do you got?
One that didn't make mine, but wish it would have, was Kingpin.
It's Steve.
Ace Ventura.
Yes! Yes!
I gotta say, Tommy Boy, Multiplicity, and House Guest. You guys only had one. I'm gonna make my have to a have 3. Alright, now let's get down to Bringing the Heat. Bringing the Heat. We each break down our honorable mentions and top picks. This week we're talking 90s comedies. Steve, what do you got?
My honorable mention was PCU.
Alright.
The movie just goes to show you that if you're able to stay in college long enough and avoid ever having to graduate, you can make a ton of fantastic friends. You can get good girl. You can have your own private party campus, and the Parliament Funkadelics will come and see you off. I think that's what happens. If you right? In the 90s, if you were stayed in college for 10 years, like Jeremy Piven.
Mickey, is that what it was like?
I never went to college, so couldn't tell you.
Alright. Very good.
But if I had gone to college, it probably would go something like that.
Yeah,
I think I was on too many drugs during the 90s to remember.
Bong hits anywhere?
What are your thoughts on PCU, Mickey?
Well, for me, PCU is probably the only movie that I actually liked with David Spade in it.
Really?
I hate David Spade, but that's another story. We're not going to talk about that.
Do me a favor and don't ever talk.
But it's also, I think, the first movie that I remember Jeremy Piven was a starring role, or he had a starring role. That was probably his first movie.
Yeah, one of the only probably still.
Yeah.
He'd absolutely no business playing a college student.
No, absolutely none. And the awesome thing about it is you have George Clinton and Parliament Funkadelics playing. And little known fact, one of the songs that they're actually performing on that was actually Erotic City, which was an early Prince song that he actually gave to George Clinton.
Really?
So that's actually one of the first times that you can actually hear that song being played.
Oh, wow.
Their version, at least, of it. So it's just a fun little college movie that is so 90s. The clothes, the attitude, the everything. And it's got a great soundtrack by Steve Vai himself.
Steve Vai's on the soundtrack.
Yeah, he actually did the whole score and everything.
Wow. Oh, man. My thoughts on PCU, I mean, it's a great example, like you said, of a classic comedy that really embraced 90s culture and ran with it. It stars one of my favorite actors, Jeremy Piven, plays a college senior at what looks like the ripe old age of 59. Also joining on the action is Chris Young from Uncle Buck fame, which I have to highlight as further evidence that we need to do a John Candy episode of Best Around. I love what this movie has to say about 90s culture, but also the fact that it doesn't go too far with it. This movie is hands down my gateway drug to George Clinton and Parliament Funkadelic, but ironically, P-Funk wasn't the first choice to be in the film. Apparently it was written with Nirvana in mind, but they wanted too much money, and at one point the Goo Goo Dolls were contemplated as a backup, but the producers felt they weren't well known enough, and George Clinton became the perfect savior of this film, which would have probably collapsed without the energy of P-Funk. I love that this movie dishes out its parodies of 90s culture evenly, making fun of hippies, yuppies, aimless protesters, neoconservatives, and just about everyone else you went to school with in the 90s. And this film will live on as part of the American culture forever with the line,
"What is this? You're going to wear this to the show. You're going to wear the shirt of the band you're going to go see. Don't be that guy."
My only complaint is that's actually not any higher on your list. But speaking of higher on your list, what'd you slot in as your number 3 pick?
Mine was number 3 pick was one of the greatest sports movies of all time. Basketball.
Oh, why?
Trey Parker and Matt Stone's, break through into Hollywood under the shell of South Park, for the first time, where they really got a chance to go all in and, make something really ridiculous. And they killed it. They absolutely killed it. You know, they had a ridiculous side cast like Jenny McCarthy and Robert Vaughn, and Real Big Fish. The ones who keep talking music.
I guess you've got a point there.
We never shy away from the soundtrack talk. Mickey, what are your thoughts on Basketball?
Well, I'm not a Real Big Fish fan, but
Most people are.
So we're not talking about Real Big Fish, though. We're talking about Basketball, and I like this movie. It was a fun little introduction to Trey and Matt. Aside from South Park. Sometimes I think that Orgasmo is better than this one. I don't know. It can go back and forth with me. I do love this movie, but sometimes I just think that Orgasmo was a better complete movie.
I trust that quality isn't sexually transmitted.
To me, though, Basketball is another feel-good jam that always represents the culture of the late 90s. Like coming off the brilliance of Orgasmo, just about to make zillions of dollars on South Park. Stone and Parker kill it as one of the best comedy duos since Bill and Ted. This movie moved the 90s comedy culture forward, taking it from the silly Jim Carrey, Adam Sandler era to a more modern, unfiltered, go-for-the-throat style of comedy. Robert Vaughn as Baxter Kane is amazing. It's an amalgam of every evil, slimy rich guy he's ever played in his career. Squeak Scolari is the classic guy that gets shit on character, which was the staple of classic 90s comedy. The song that plays in the car is absolute fucking gold. The Unsolved Mysteries parody was total perfection. Even Yasmin Bleeth's performance in the movie is pretty underrated. She does a lot more than just hold her own against Stone and Parker's over-the-top antics. A fun, escapist, quotable, high-concept 90s comedy that has no doubt aged like wine. So what do you got as your number 2 pick?
All right. Well, speaking of brilliant creators, I have Mallrats. Kevin Smith's Mallrats.
Where do you come up with this shit?
You want to say the quintessential, 90s feel movie? I would have to give it to that. The entire thing takes place in a mall.
Very
a bunch
true.
of 40-years playing high school students. Traditional 90s, everything. Well, what are your thoughts, Mickey?
Well, I remember seeing this movie actually in the theaters, and I absolutely loved the movie. It's an underrated classic to me. Part of the Jersey trilogy, I believe. While I will choose Chasing Amy over this one,
Shut up!
I love it as Jason Lee's kind of main movie. I mean, for me, this is Jason Lee's top movie that he's done of all time. I mean, you did have some other characters in there. Obviously, you had the, Silent Bob, and all that good stuff, which is the best scene in the movie is the...
I'm satisfied!
But yeah, in the end, I just love this movie, and I think it's one of Kevin Smith's classics, a little underrated gem.
I thought was kind of interesting about this movie, and give it a little deeper thought, is that it really had 2 protagonists, both of which kind of on the same path, and totally, completely different characters. Supposed to be friends, but they're not even really on this journey together. So, you know what I mean? The two, one's an anti-hero, kind of deal or whatever. The other one's just a traditional, guy pining over girl.
Which is interesting because it makes it almost 2 90s movies happening in one.
That was the biggest load of crap I've ever heard!
I absolutely love this film the first time I ever heard Brody's opening monologue. Ironically, that is one of 2 My Cousin Walter stories Brody tells in the film, and Randall tells a My Cousin Walter story in Clerks. So in the View Askew universe, Randall and Brody may be related, and they may both have a cousin that jerked off on a plane, got a cat stuck up his ass, and broke his neck trying to go down on himself.
True story.
Kidding aside, this is a movie that spoke to me in a number of ways. The dialogue, the comic book references, and the fact that one of the film's leading men was an aimless, ambitionless, video game playing, shit-talking guy with a Comedy Central sign in his room, years before South Park even existed. Even hanging out at the mall all day is something every 90s kid can relate to. Easily one of the most well-casted 90s comedies with Jason Lee, Jeremy London, Shannon Doherty, Claire Filani, Joey Lauren Adams, Jason Mewes, Ben Affleck, Stan Lee, and Michael Rooker. One of the best films in the View Askew universe, if not the best, and unquestionably one of the best 90s comedies. Thumbs up for me. What do you got as your number 1?
My number 1 was Dumb and Dumber.
I like it a lot.
That movie was hysterical. First time I saw it, still holds up today. One of the Fairley Brothers' greatest hits out there. Jim Carrey, Jeff Daniels coming in and being able to actually stand with Jim Carrey in a comedic role. It was stupid, and it was about nothing, but that was all 90s comedies in a sense,
That's true.
This one absolutely slayed it.
I have to agree. Mickey, your thoughts on Dumb and Dumber?
Well, I couldn't disagree more. I just watched this movie one time, hated it then, hate it now.
Wow.
It's literally probably one of the dumbest movies of all time.
Oh! Well, pardon me, Mr. Perfect!
I know a lot of people are sitting there going, this is a Jim Carrey classic and everything else like that, but to me it's just dumb.
No, that was the point.
Well, it made its point very clear.
I guess I forgot that you never ever make a mistake.
You know, the weird thing about that is, on both attempts of making sequels, of cashing in off of, you know, the success of the original, both were terrible.
Yeah.
Both the what would you call it, prequel and sequel?
Yeah.
Yeah. Both, yeah, absolutely both awful.
Yeah, they were both pretty bad, but I guess Mickey hated them all anyways.
Yeah, and I know that I do like some questionable things, but I just can't get down with this.
Hey, you know, it's comedy is very personal. It's all about taste. That's why we thought this would be a good episode to do.
I know this may seem a little sudden, but I've given it a lot of thought.
To me, this is another classic 90s comedy that got played on VHS till the friggin' wheels fell off. Coming off Ace Ventura and Living Color, Jim Carrey's career went from comedian to superstar faster than you can say Samsonite. Carrey made it to the top by being willing to be the dumbest guy in the room at a time when comedy needed a new direction. Comedians were rock stars, comedy actors were action stars, and Jim Carrey turned all that on its head. And he couldn't have found better partners in crime than Jeff Daniels and the Farrelly brothers.
They're very nice.
Before they were household names, there were two unknowns who shared a similar vision with Carrey on where comedy was headed, and this film put them on a hot streak with Kingpin, There's Something About Mary, and Me, Myself, and Irene all coming next. There's probably not a scene or a line in this movie that 10-year-olds weren't quoting or imitating, and I was definitely no exception. You can't downplay Jeff Daniels' importance in this film either. Every one of his agents told him that this film would ruin the career he'd spent years building, and that Jim Carrey would blow him off the screen. But Daniels stuck to his instincts, and they captured lightning in a bottle for me. Would I call it the best comedy of the 90s? No, but I definitely would call it one of the decade's most classic offerings, hands down.
We'll see.
We'll see how it shapes up. So, that tees up Mickey. What do you got for your honorable mention of 90s comedies?
Well, for my first honorable mention, or my only honorable mention actually, it's American Pie. First time I ever laid eyes on Tara Reid, I was hooked.
Excuse me?
But it just had a classic ensemble cast of young actors, some of which you never had heard before. I think actually maybe you never heard of all
Any of them,
yeah. So it was a really good, fun little R-rated humor movie. I mean, classic lines and classic scenes, like, of course, the pie fucking scene. We all remember that. Stifler's mom.
Right.
It's just a classic movie all the way.
Definitely agree. Steve, your thoughts on American Pie?
American Pie to me was like the 90s, you know, reversion of like an Animal House. You know what I mean? They kind of you know, reinvented the wheel on like stupid, you know, teenage comedies.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like Porky's too. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
yeah, those like really like to the edge or whatever, but still keeping it, you know, funny enough for the whole family to be able to watch it.
I think you need your balls reattached.
Definitely a good picture of where we were in the late 90s. Just look at the clothes these guys wear and you could practically taste the pizza bagels. This was at a time when the decade was near its end, and screenwriter Adam Hertz must have thought, what happened to all the raunchy sex comedies they used to make in the 80s? And decided to make arguably the first one in the 90s in the last year of the decade. This movie is so 90s it even has Thomas Ian Nicholas from Rookie of the Year. From The Have To.
I don't get it.
It made household names out of Jason Biggs, Mina Suvari, Chris Klein, Sean William Scott, your girl Tara Reid, and Shannon Elizabeth. But to me, the performance that's not to be overlooked is Eugene Levy's turn as Jim's dad, a character who perfectly represents every nerdy thing you've ever seen your own dad do.
Hey, big boy. Hey, how you doing?
This movie had a massive appeal to my comedy sensibilities at the time, being 14 when it came out, and even though I'm older now and these types of movies aren't as relatable as they used to be, this one does have a slight charm underneath the raunch that makes it an endearing 90s film to go back to and enjoy. Definitely a classic.
Something just occurred to me. Has every movie so far that we've done off this list had a band come in at some point or whatever just to solidify its 90s comedy status?
I think so, yeah.
Blink-182 was there.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of
I guess that was a huge 90s thing.
Joe P-Funk?
P-Funk, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, a lot of 90s tie-in bands. I mean, it's a belief from the 80s. They had the tie-in videos and shit. Now they were putting the bands like in the movie even more so in the 90s. But moving on, what's your number 3 pick for 90s comedies?
Number 3 pick is going to be Clueless. Great little 90s comedy, high school flick.
Real quick, the Mighty Mighty Boss Puns.
I still need lessons from you on how to be cool.
I think that was the thing in the 90s. You just had to have the bands do it, you know, go in movies and do that. Alicia Silverstein's first role.
She did a couple things before that. She was in the Aerosmith videos, obviously, and she was in the movie Crush with Carrie Elwes.
Thank you.
But yeah, that was definitely the movie that was her arrival, for sure. Like, that movie just made her an instant superstar. Before she was that girl, now everyone knew her name.
Yeah. You had a young Brittany Murphy in there, too, R.I.P. So, a lot of, young actors and actresses in that movie. Some of my favorite scenes are, like, the driving on the highway scene when Dion's just kind of freaking out and her boyfriend's helping her out, and that's the time that Cher really discovers what love is about, what true love is about.
After that, Dion's virginity went from technical to non-existent.
It's just so cheesy. It's so great.
Yeah.
A lot of sing-alongs in there when they're at the party and rolling with the homies and all that good stuff. It's just a classic little feel-good movie.
Yeah, definitely. Almost like the Valley Girl of the 90s.
Yeah, I could say that. Yeah, because they were from the Valley too, right?
They go to the Valley.
They go to the Valley. Yeah, the party was at the Valley. Yeah.
Remember, she gets upset if someone thinks she lives below Sunset.
Ugh, as if!
Steve, your thoughts on Clueless?
I think it's a great movie. Of course, but it's kind of an interesting take or whatever. It's one of those 90s teen comedies that can't relate to really.
Yeah, obviously. We're not girls and we didn't grow up in like Malibu.
Right. So it kind of gives it a more of an interesting, feel that makes their dynamics kind of funny.
I'm not trying to hear that!
To me, though, this is just about as 90s as a comedy can possibly be. Alicia Silverstone was the object of every 90s kid's affections, and this movie was definitely her moment at the top. Directed by the incredible Amy Heckerling, who brought us such classics as Fast Times at Ridgemont High and Look Who's Talking, Clueless is a perfect look at mid-90s culture. Flannel is everywhere, kids were either stoners, skaters, stuck-up, or snobby. And Paul Rudd, Stacey Dash, Dan Hedaya, Brittany Murphy, Wallace Shawn, Breckenmeyer, Donald Faison, and Twin Captain run out an incredibly funny cast, and the writing, which feels tailor-made for Silverstone, holds up very well to this day.
Very good.
This is one of those movies you're always down to watch when it's on TV, and even though it has a ton of 90s moments, the film in general has aged very well, and it doesn't feel as dated as most teen comedies do after 23 years.
2 very enthusiastic thumbs up. Fine holiday fun.
Even though the Clueless brand may have been watered down by the TV show, the movie has a level of charm that, coupled with its brisk pace, feels like a fun trip down memory lane every time it's on. And there's one thing modern Americans still need to learn from Cher Horowitz.
And in conclusion, may I please remind you that it does not say RSVP on the Statue of Liberty.
But moving on, what do you have as your number 2 pick?
Number 2 pick is Happy Gilmore. Absolutely has to be one of my favorite Adam Sandler movies of all time.
Is that good?
It's just a great little flick. So much hilarity in there. Classic one-liners, like when he's talking to Bob Barker and he's like,
The price is wrong, bitch.
how can you go wrong with lines like that? You had the great Carl Weathers as Chubbs in there and giving happy advice.
Hey, it's all good. Come on. Work with me now.
So for me, it's just an Adam Sandler classic from head to toe.
Just shut your trap.
All right.
I remember seeing Billy Madison and thinking, whatever movie they do next with this guy, I just hope to God it's like a fraction of as good as this, so they keep doing them.
You like that?
And that movie was like on par with Billy Madison, which should have been on my list. That movie's an incredible comedy.
That's spoken like a true asshole. Look.
This movie is classic Sandler. I feel like I was that kid who made everybody watch Billy Madison, and by the time Happy Gilmore came out, my strategy had paid dividends. While Billy Madison was an incredible comedy, it didn't stray too far out of what was considered mainstream comedy at the time. But Happy Gilmore truly felt like a breath of fresh air for 90s comedy culture. America was lost in 1996. Absolutely lost.
Happy the counter!
But thankfully, Adam Sandler and director Dennis Dugan were coming into their prime as comedy filmmakers. They crafted a movie that was non-stop belly laughs from beginning to end, with humor that was the perfect blend of random chaos mixed with top-shelf setup and payoffs.
I think you should be working at the snack bar.
This is one of the first movies I remember quoting all night after I left the theater.
Bitch.
Christopher McDonald is perfection as Shooter McGavin. Carl Weathers couldn't have been better as Chubbs Peterson. Frances Bay was unquestionably the best possible choice to play Happy's grandma. No one else on earth could have played Mr. Larson better than the amazing Richard Kiel. When you go down the list of Ben Stiller, Julie Bowen, Robert Smigel, Bob Barker, Kevin Nealon, Alan Colbert, and Joe Flaherty, you find nothing short of comedy perfection.
Come on, boy. Cut that out. You're making me sick.
It's also kind of the last early Sandler film. He sort of shifted gears after Happy Gilmore, and every time he tried to go back and do a movie like Happy Gilmore, it never quite worked as well again.
Why don't you just shut your trap before I put my foot in it?
Still, Happy Gilmore is a timeless 90s classic. That goes down to your number 1 pick. So what is your greatest 90s comedy of all time?
Greatest 90s comedy of all time, hands down, House Party.
Why don't you just go home? A little test tube, baby.
Yes.
I cannot talk enough about this movie. It's one of the greatest party movies of all time. I remember seeing this at the theaters with my friends, my homies. We were all hyped to see this. The music is classic in it, all that good, like late 80s, early 90s.
Look, I got the dope lyrics.
This is all the stuff we were dancing to when I was a kid in my school dances. We were all about it. Everybody wanted to do the kid and play dance. It was just the jam. So that then you had like great comedians in it, from Robin Harris, R.I.P.
Well, he must be out of his mind.
To John Witherspoon.
Yeah.
Classic scenes, like, obviously when, kid finally gets to rap.
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry.
Which is awesome.
That is classic.
I can go on for days. The John Witherspoon yelling at the kids at the house party.
Hey, brother, you by yourself. What's wrong, brother? Said maybe that big waterhead you got.
It also said something about that 90s kind of thing with racial stereotypes and a lot of the problems that were going on in the decade as well, because you had Robin Harris and the cops actually were harassing him, and he was just trying to go find his kid and stuff like that.
And that movie I'm pretty sure predated Rodney King and all that stuff.
All that
you know
stuff.
what I mean?
Actually,
so that was pretty ahead of pop culture and all that.
And I think, to me, it was the start of actually hearing some of that stuff talked about in movies.
I'm going to mind my fucking business. That's where I'm going. Do you have a problem with that, officer?
But it was a fun little movie.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree on a lot of those points. Steve, your thoughts on House Party?
When I first saw House Party, I was actually at a house party. Weirdly enough, I was also the only black kid there.
Yo, this punk motherfucker throwing shit at us.
I like the movie. I think when it came out, I might have been a little too young to be able to really, wrap my head around how much fun this house party would be if I could actually attend it. But no, I haven't seen it in a while, but I do remember it being a fantastic comedy.
Yo, I will break my leg off, up in your ass so far that you be shitting sneaker for a month.
To me, House Party just comes from a much simpler time, and I mean that in the best way possible. As a kid, this was a VHS box that just immediately spoke to me. I knew from the title and the cover art exactly what this movie was, and it delivered in every way possible. I love the whole House Party series, and I don't care what you say about the sequels.
Ain't no thing to do it again.
Kid and Play are one of the best comedy duos of the decade. The legendary Robin Harris is iconic as ever. Martin Lawrence and Tisha Campbell Martin pre-the show Martin.
Who you talking to?
And the amazing Kelly Jo Minter, who has never failed to steal my heart, kills it as LaDonna.
If I'm a bitch, your mama's a bitch.
Interesting trivia on this film is that it was written for Will Smith and Jazzy Jeff, who had actually been sued by New Line Cinema for releasing a song called Nightmare on My Street. The actual conditions of the lawsuit were that they had to appear in a New Line film. The 90s were a weird fucking time. When director Reginald Hudlin found out about the lawsuit, he refused to cast them under those circumstances. Lucky for us, because we definitely would have gotten any more house parties with those two at the helm.
Yo, man, you are wrong.
I wouldn't call it the best 90s comedy ever, but it's definitely one of my early 90s favorites, and it's a nostalgic, fun, wild ride of a movie. So I guess that only leaves me. Breaking it down with my top picks for 90s comedies, starting off with my honorable mention, I'm going to go with Encino Man.
Shush!
Before I go all day on this movie, guys, your thoughts, Encino Man?
B. Frasier, Brendan Fraser. If this was an honorable mention and it won, I'd be okay with it, with him being in it.
No.
Steve has a lot of love for B. Frasier.
I do.
Right, yeah, definitely a Fraser fan.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for me, I saw this movie in the theaters, and it's Pauly Shore goodness.
Oh, yeah.
Probably one of my favorite Pauly Shore movies.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks.
I mean, there's a lot of good scenes in it. I mean, Link, taking the student driver car and taking it on two wheels, and
Radmobile.
yeah, I mean, you got some good stuff in this movie, so I like it.
Who is this dipshit anyway?
You know what I liked about Encino Man is the character who you thought was supposed to be the antagonist and supposed to be the leading role of that movie was really just the worst.
This guy's our ticket to fame and popularity.
Really just nobody cared about even at the end of it. He ate shit at the end of it too. Like nothing came to terms for him. Like he didn't learn anything.
I'm gonna be the prom king, and I'm gonna graduate a legend.
It was Pauly Shore and B. Frasier living it out after that, and he's just but he got the girl, right?
Well, it's funny. Not really.
He should have.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. That's always one aspect of the film that's been really weird for me, too, and I will get into that in a sec.
I count the days.
But starting at the beginning, with Encino Man, this is the type of fun, off-the-wall comedy that could have only been made in the late 80s or early 90s. And only at that time could a comedy about two high schoolers throwing out a frozen caveman and becoming his best friend be one of the biggest star-making films of the decade, as it put Pauly Shore and Brendan Fraser at the front line to superstardom.
We're going on to bigger and better things, buddy.
Watching the film now, it's obvious Pauly Shore was about to break out in a huge way, and he steals every scene he's in, but it's kind of funny to me how Brendan Fraser broke out so big off of this one film which he has almost no dialogue. It's definitely a testament to his screen charisma and star power.
He's dope. I'd go out with him.
And like you said, I always felt like Sean Astin's role in this movie was written as one of the strangest leading men in any teen comedy film.
Robin wouldn't piss on your gums if your teeth were on fire. Yes, she would.
He uses his friends, someone else beats up his bully, he gets absolutely shit on by Megan Ward's Robin, who he treats like a creepy, weird stalker.
Don't forget, we've been naked together.
I guess it makes the film more real, but it's one aspect of the film that always seems strange to me. Still a great movie, though, and a great memory of the comedy stylings of 1992. So coming down with my number 3 pick, we have Wedding Singer.
It's what? Holy shit, this is incredible.
Once again, before I talk everybody's ears off, I figure I'll let you guys give a chance to weigh in. Nikki, your thoughts on Wedding Singer?
Wedding Singer, just another Adam Sandler classic. I actually probably would have put it in my list, but Happy Gilmore is just a tad bit better for me.
No way.
But I love Wedding Singer. You have so many great scenes. You have great soundtrack.
Two great soundtracks.
Yeah, two great. Yeah, that's right.
Volume 1 and 2.
It's just got all the 80s gems. You got Drew Barrymore. You got a great flick.
Yeah, I know. In and out, though, man. I don't want to be here very long.
Absolutely. Steve, what do you think of Wedding Singer?
I completely concur. I think that was Sandler coming back, or whatever, and still showing us that he's just got, he's got it just like he did with Happy Gilmore and Billy Madison. That movie's fantastic.
Can we turn this crap off, please?
Of course, one of my picks for the best 90s comedies would be a movie that's set in the 80s.
I like old Coke better than new Coke because it's old, and so am I.
And that fact alone is why it's only my number 3, but it's also kind of the point in general. 90s culture to me didn't become anything worth reliving until we accepted the fact that 90s culture sucked, and we made it about reliving the retro and positivity of the 80s.
That's my favorite part.
This film is tailor-made for Sandler, and that he gets to sing, be funny, charm Drew Barrymore, scream and be loud, fall apart, and give singing lessons for meatballs.
Oh yeah, well, they taste so good, it's like I'm ripping you off, Rosie.
It's a balance of all his strengths and comedy styles with 80s nostalgia jokes that had already stood the test of time and will most likely never really date themselves.
I don't know. We're living in a material world, and I am a material girl.
This movie helped usher in a culture of bringing back and reliving the 80s, which I was 1,000% on board with, and which we haven't stopped doing since. I can't help but think this movie helped greenlight films like 200 Cigarettes and Wet Hot American Summer, and helped pave the way for projects like Kung Fury and Stranger Things.
And for some reason, you like being the guy that helps them realize that, don't you?
My favorite Sandler film, my favorite 90s comedy, and cultural tastemaker all rolled into one perfect little package. So, bringing it down to my number 2 pick, we have Mrs. Doubtfire.
Surprise!
Steve, your thoughts on Mrs. Doubtfire?
I remember really enjoying that movie when I was a kid. The only part of it that didn't really hold up to me, the ending. I know it gave such like a happy ending of how it had to end up, and that's their version of a realistic aftermath of what divorce can be, and you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I think that was about as happy and sad of like kind of a balanced ending as they could do in the 90s.
Yeah?
Like that, to me in the 90s, that was the sad ending. You look back on it now and it's like, oh, that's really happy. Like he gets the kids back and all this stuff. But like, in the 80s, they would have gotten back together.
Right.
Or the 70s, so I mean? So it was like, we're slowly taking steps to more realism in the 90s, That's kind of why it's on my list too. But Mickey, what are your thoughts on Mrs. Doubtfire?
I am not a fan of this movie at all.
Oh, shit!
I know that this holds like a true place in a lot of 90s kids' hearts. But for me, this is just not a good movie at all. I am not a fan of Robin Williams as a comedian, to be honest. All his stupid faces and all his stupid noises and stuff like that. I just can't get down with that.
Well, it's certainly a rough meeting, and it's not going very well for me, I'll tell you that.
I actually like Robin Williams in his more serious roles, like Good Will Hunting and stuff like that. I think he's a great dramatic actor.
Thank you.
And I find that in a lot of comedians, they're actually better in drama roles in comedy. But in any event, it's just a sad movie. I mean, it's a movie that's trying to be funny, but it's about divorce.
Oh, it was such a shanda.
Pierce Brosnan's in there, and it's just...
What can I say, Ron? The guy's a loser.
Not to mention, you got Matthew Lawrence. Matthew Lawrence, of all the people. You couldn't get Joey?
Let's pray. Can you imagine if, like, I disguised myself to let my ex-wife give me visitation rights for my kid and lied to her and
Yeah.
stalked her and stayed in the house all day. And
Why in God's name are you dressed like a woman?
but and the kids too. This kid's got to find out their nanny. This woman. How do they explain that?
Oh, you know what's funny is his kids walking in on him in the bathroom,
When he's
standing
peeing,
up
yeah.
peeing,
Yeah.
is like every Fox News watcher's worst nightmare.
Oh my god!
That's how it starts.
We gotta dial 911 now! Why?
This movie exists in between the hyper-colored happiness of the early 90s and the dark alternative grunge of the mid-90s, making this a bright spot of originality caught in between two seas of imitators.
Well, I'll put on a chicken.
Hardly the first gender-bender cross-dressing comedy, but still an absolute showcase of Robin Williams' talent and Chris Columbus' skill as a director. The supporting cast is great, the divorce seems real, and even though you want Robin Williams and Sally Field to work it out, you know they're better off without each other.
It's over!
There are tons of classic quotes, but to me a real standout in this film is Robert Prosky's portrayal of Jonathan Lundy.
Why?
Think about Lundy for a sec. He's a successful TV executive who not only doesn't fire a guy who shit-talks one of his longest-running shows, but he takes a meeting with that guy after he saw him playing with dinosaurs and gives him a job after it's revealed he cross-dresses as an old grandma to get close to his kids.
That's my kind of guy.
Gentlemen?
What's even more interesting is that Lundy is also looking to party. When he thinks Robin Williams was making out with a girl at the restaurant, he promptly asks,
Does your girlfriend have a girlfriend?
Hey, it's the 90s.
Oh, no, I mean it. Does she have a lady friend for me?
and reminds Robin Williams that
I got the stretch outside.
he's drinking scotch, looking to party, and down with progressive values and principles. I think I might vote Jonathan Lundy 2020.
You dog.
You overlooked my favorite character in this movie.
Who's that?
Harvey Firestein.
Honey, I'm so happy.
Yeah,
They
that's
didn't
true.
utilize him enough. He's absolutely fantastic and everything.
He was, yeah. He was like the guy in the 90s. Like from 93 to 96,
Yeah.
Harvey Firestein was on fire.
I think we have to go to the next level.
Another thing overlooked in this movie, in what world is Pierce Brosnan dating?
Sally Field.
As a mom with, what, 2 kids?
I have to go. We have to leave now. I have to leave. We have to leave now. I have to go.
Anyways, moving on to my number one pick, we have the amazing early 90s classic, Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead.
Don't you have any pride?
Let's see you guys weigh in. Mickey, what do you think on Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead?
Don't Tell Mom. I like this movie. It's a fun little movie. I'm not going to say that it's my favorite movie of the 90s.
This is by far and away the most petty, spiteful, vindictive machination you have ever concocted. Grow up.
But again, I think this is just something that's lost on me. Where most people find this the greatest movie ever, I find it as just an okay movie.
I can't stand that conniving little snot.
I like Christina Applegate in it. I mean, that was the first role that I can remember her outside of, Kelly Bundy. And probably the first movie that she did, right?
I don't know.
I don't really love this movie, but I like it. It's much like Doubtfire, though. It's a comedy out of tragedy. You basically have some kids covering up a murder. Or not a murder, but a death. Just so they can stay unsupervised.
Shirking all that parental responsibility.
Yeah, Mrs. Sturek's family is always going to wonder, whatever happened to Grandma?
Exactly.
That was the part that killed me more than anything, is these kids, they go above and beyond to take on these full adult responsibilities and revamp their whole lives, change, internally, and grow, and, have no idea what they're doing. It's like a really long, drawn out, experience for them. And watching this, being like, that's really nice to see. Them coming into their own and doing whatever. They only do this so they could stay unsupervised for the summer.
And cover up the fact that an old lady died in their home.
They'll probably blame us.
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
put her in a trunk and put her outside of a morgue with a note that says, really nice lady or something like that.
How well did you raise all of your children if there's 7 of them and all of them think it's okay to cover up the body and not call mom to come home from vacation?
I think that she wanted this way, don't you?
That's exactly what mom would have wanted me to do. Cover it up, leave no trace, and dump the body.
Forget it.
To me, this is the first real 90s comedy. So I had to go number one on this one for setting the tone alone.
Thanks for helping out.
First off, let's honor this as being one of the most well-casted comedies ever made. That's right. Keith Coogan, Daniel Harris, Christina Applegate, Josh Charles, Joanna Cassidy, John Getz, Jane Brooke, even David Duchovny kills it as Metallica breath.
Justice is served.
The kids, the friends, the mom, Mrs. Sturak, even the clown dog boss is spot on.
Forgot to put on a happy face.
Incredibly well directed by a pre-Mighty Ducks post-Bill and Ted Stephen Herrick, and I use the line,
I'm right on top of that, Rose.
almost every day of my life. This is another film that's famous for its casting production shakeups, as Sue Ellen was originally supposed to be played by Justine Bateman of Family Ties fame,
And no one's gonna know, right?
and Melissa was supposed to be played by Jennifer Love Hewitt, but she couldn't get out of her Kids Incorporated schedule.
Let's kick some ass.
Also, the script was originally titled The Real World, and the title was changed once the MTV show went into development.
How could you do this?
Actor Keith Coogan has said at first he felt tricked into appearing in another movie with a babysitter in the title, but he later agreed that it was the perfect title for the film.
Yeah, she was a great babysitter.
A timeless classic that you watch every time it's on and never disappoints. Seriously in need of a Blu-ray release, though. Get on that shit, HBO.
Well, I couldn't fit it into my schedule. I'll do it later.
So the votes are in, and we concluded that the best 90s comedies of all time are Happy Gilmore, Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, and Mallrats. That about sums it up for 90s comedies. Once again, I'm Chris.
I'm Mickey.
And I'm best around.
Sure tune in next week when we're talking about the best bad movies ever made. Later, guys.